Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick! Lays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into a special edition of Gamecock Pod Live for September the 19th, episode number 1577, where in just a few minutes we'll be joined by our good friend from thebigspur.com, Alex Jones. We may have other guests. We had Hale was lined up to join us this morning. Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur. His daughter has a virus. He may be able to pop on if she gets down for a nap. And Peyton Titus, who is recovering from an illness, also may drop by if she is feeling better. Good morning to you, William. Let's go ahead before Alex pops on and go through our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, Fort Mill, Rock Hill, Lancaster area. I'm talking about Nana's Porch, your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or now that the weather's cooling off, the big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue. Nana's Porch has got you covered. And as we all know, the award-winning pimento cheese voted the last 2 years number one, and then last year number one and number two in the meat and cheese category, is now available online. You go to nanasporch.com, that's NANASPORCH.com, regardless of your catering needs. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. I strongly urge all of you to support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. And you're just a couple of clicks away from being able to have the award-winning Nana's Porch pimento cheese delivered right to your doorstep. That's right. Go to the website, look at the top of the menu, click on pimento cheese, and you can order both flavors, one flavor. Multiple packages are available. Shipping is free through Southern Foods. And so now, regardless of location, you can all experience that award-winning pimento cheese. Again, nanasporch.com, NANASPORCH.com. You'll love it. I guarantee it. All right, the Gamecocks will wear their 1970s, 1980 throwback uniform on Saturday. This is the George Rogers era uniform that Jim Carlin essentially just copied from his days at Texas Tech. After Paul Dietzel was fired in 1974, Carlin was hired from Texas Tech. They got the garnet jerseys back then. The running backs and quarterbacks had mesh tearaway jerseys, so they could get away. They're not going to have those, but it'll be the white helmet with the stars, with the bigger block C with the Gamecock, the garnet jersey with the number on the front and the back and on the shoulder, below the shoulder pads, and the white pants with the wide garnet, black and garnet stripe. And quite frankly, some of my most fondest memories, I should say, are from that era. Driving down to the games from Norris all the way to Columbia, tailgating before the games and after, sitting with my parents up in Section 305, row 38, which does not exist now because they built a new press box up there. But getting a chance to watch the greatest player of all times at the University of South Carolina, George Rogers, live and in person. And you know what? Every time he scored a touchdown, every time he broke a big run, he never celebrated. He never took his helmet off. He never pointed at himself. He would either just hand the ball to the official closest by, or he would just gently sit it on the ground and try to trot off, and then he was mugged by his teammates. That was clearly a different era of college football, although the Gamecocks are kind of replicating that. We'll get into that with Alex Jones, who will be popping in just a minute. Saturday's game, 7:30 against Akron on ESPNU. Clay Matvick, who I've never heard of, will be on the call. And Steve Adazio will be the color analyst, who I have heard of. And so then on the radio broadcast, you get Todd and Tommy, which is always interesting for sure. On Friday, South Carolina announced Ray Tanner's time as athletic director was drawing to an end. He will transition out of that role in November. President Michael Amaritis will conduct a search. It will be a national search. He will lead the search. He's hiring a search firm. And based off information I have, he will interview the candidates that are vetted by the search firm. He will make a decision, and then he will bring his choice to the Board of Trustees. So there won't be too many cooks in the kitchen. All right, those are your Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines for September the 19th. Let's bring in one of the hardest working men I know, Alex Jones. Alex looks like he just slept in his office. He was probably on the late night show with Matt Anderson last night. He probably just, after writing about 1,200 stories last night, about 4 a.m., he just put his pillow down in his office and got a couple hours of sleep. Alex, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. How about you? It's good to be on here again.
Well, it is our pleasure to have you for certain. And so let's look back at the LSU game. I do want to talk about some statistics on this team. We'll look ahead a little bit to Akron. But I thought South Carolina really let a golden opportunity, no offense, since LSU's colors are purple and gold. But South Carolina up 17-0 and 24-10 in that game, not able to finish the deal, but it's a golden opportunity. Alex, your thoughts on that South Carolina LSU game? Your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
go up, 17-0 in that one, and just let it just kind of slip away. Just you had that one pretty much. I mean, you just had all the momentum in that game, and then LSU kind of turned it a little bit, and into halftime took the momentum, and so it was a back and forth game in the second half, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the calls that happened and all of that in that game, but it's just unfortunate for South Carolina, just couldn't hang on to that lead, and it's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back this week, because we've seen what can happen in college football. You really never know every day or every week, and we've seen Notre Dame took down Texas A&M and College Station, and then it came back to South Bend and lost to Northern Illinois. So you got to be focused every week, and I'm sure this team will be come Saturday.
That is the hope. I was encouraged by Shane Beamer's comments on the team not showing signs on Tuesday. Dial Loggins talked about it as well. I really thought, I think that's the first time all year South Carolina's had the ball first, or if they did have it first, it's the first time they've gone down and scored to open the game. 7 plays, 75 yards. I thought it was an excellent drive, getting Joshua Simon involved early, getting the running game going early. South Carolina goes up. I think at that point it was 10-0, and that's when you had the first of many controversial calls, the horse collar, which I want to say, in my judgment, as a Texas high school official, we use the NCAA rule book. We're one of 2 states in the country to do it. And I really didn't think it met the level of a horse collar, because by definition, it has to be an abrupt takedown. And that's generally because you've been grabbed on the inside of your pads. Now, they made this whole big deal about how they changed the rule this year to include the tackle box. Well, I promise I'm going to get to you in just a second, but I do want to explain this for our audience. That rule was changed to protect running backs, because running backs were getting the ball right up the middle, and a big defensive lineman could just reach their paw out and reach inside the inside of their shoulder pads and just yank them to the ground. And it was not a penalty. Or grab them by the back of their shoulder pads and seriously, injure them. And is not a penalty in the tackle box. That was not changed to protect the quarterback. South Carolina, Kyle Kennard had Garrett Nussmeier by the back of the jersey, and he was going backwards. But he was not abruptly pulled to the ground because they had him by the jersey. And I've seen many, many games, Alex, where that's not called because it was not an abrupt pull down. He was going backwards and threw the ball, and then after he threw the ball, he fell to the ground. And so I thought, that stadium, if that stands and it's 17-0 that early, even though eventually it would be 17-0, I thought that was really a big moment in the game.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those momentum potential shifting plays, and it was really tough on that call just because I think there's so much gray area with that horse collar call. Just just kind of a judgment call, and when you look at it, you can see he kind of grabbed the jersey, he going down, and it was that's just a tough call all the way around. And then just to add on that it was a pick six, to go with it. So I thought that was one of the questionable calls, but to be honest, the other 2 more questionable calls were the one that I still have a lot of questions about as to just what happened and what those referees saw that allowed them to throw the flags. I'm sure we'll get into that too.
All right, so let's address those, and then I want to move on. So there are multiple self-inflicted penalties by the Gamecocks. False starts, linemen downfield. Again, for the third straight week, we've seen that called. It wiped off a 2-point conversion and some other plays. I thought the phantom offensive pass interference was a call that absolutely did not exist in any universe. I mean, and it wiped off an explosive play, and what would have been for Dale Von Campbell, I have to think a big confidence builder, because Ashford threw it up and he went up and got it, and that would have been over probably around a 40-yard gain. That was just to quote Will Muschamp, the SEC's motto is "It just matters more." Well, sometimes it just matters more what your logo is. Now, I'm probably going to piss some people off with this one. I thought the blindside block call on Kyle Kennard was actually live. I didn't like it. After watching the replay multiple times, the rule on the blindside block is you must give the player an opportunity to see you in a 10-2 position and have an opportunity to protect yourself before contact. And while it was an award-winning, Oscar-worthy performance by Nussmeier, who stayed on the turf all the way until Eamon Warry had ran 100 yards with the football. He had a miraculous recovery. He wasn't hit that hard, but as he's turning and as he's taking that first step, he did get shoved, and it made it worse because Kennard kind of launched when he shoved him. Even though he didn't really hit him, he just shoved him. I thought, unfortunately, after watching it multiple times, I didn't really have a problem with it, because that is the letter of the rule. It is player safety. Was it an acting job? Did he get hit that hard? No. Could you have let it slide? I think if that game's at LSU and LSU makes that play against South Carolina, it's probably not called.
The pass interference call on Mazio Bennett, I haven't seen an angle where there has been a pass or where you can even throw a flag on that. And it's kind of, when you think about that play too, it's a great throw by Robbie Ashford and a great play by Dale Von Campbell. I mean, that changes the game right there too, because South Carolina's deep in LSU's territory there, have a good drive going, but instead they get way behind the chains, and it just couldn't get anything going from that. And then the blindside block is just, and my question on it would be, if that was any other player but the quarterback, would that flag be thrown? And I think the answer would be no. I don't think a flag would be thrown on that. And, you feel for Kyle Kennard just because of that instance. And, I'm sure he's going to bounce back and have a strong game, but just is, South Carolina, feels like they probably let this one slip through their fingers, even with the controversial calls that we've talked about here.
So I do want to mention one more call, and then we'll move on from the Zebras. So on Lenore Sellers' interception, when Carolina had the ball down in LSU territory, which was another big momentum shifting play, Alex, he clearly, I think we lost Alex, or at least his video. There he is. Alex.
Sorry, internet. Sorry, my internet's not cooperating, but
Lenore Sellers clearly got clubbed in the head on that. I mean, you can see it. You could see it before they cut to the trajectory of the ball and the interception, which I thought Jared Brown, quite frankly, did a terrible job of adjusting to the ball and playing defense on that as well. But I'm really surprised there was not a booth-initiated review for a roughing the passer on that because they clearly clubbed him in the head. And quite frankly, everybody in the press box should have been probably telling Shane Beamer to call timeout to have that play reviewed because he clearly got hit in the head. And that was another empty possession for South Carolina when they had an opportunity to get points in a turnover that did not need to be because it should have been South Carolina's ball 1st and 10 at the LSU 15 after you assess a personal foul penalty because you can't hit the quarterback in the head, and they clearly clubbed him in the head, and they didn't call it.
Yeah, and I didn't catch that even live or even looking at the replay until, the next day going back and watching it. And I think that would have warranted a roughing the passer flag. So it's crazy how many, how many calls there were against, South or potential calls against South Carolina that did not go their way. And, at the end of the day, they're not going to blame the officials for losing the game because there was other things that, happened in that game that South Carolina could have controlled. But it just seems like there's a lot just going against South Carolina in this game and just one where they just couldn't quite keep the lead and pull it off.
I mean, it's hard enough to beat a really good LSU team. But 41 pass attempts, no holding calls on LSU. I find that kind of hard to believe, even though I do respect their offensive tackles. But you're right. Don't jump off sides on 4th and 3 when they throw an incomplete pass. Don't get false start penalties. Don't fumble the ball. Okay, quarterbacks. South Carolina through 3 games has fumbled the ball 9 times. Fortunately, they've only lost 3 of them, but they lost some critical ones that gave LSU a short field. But let's face it, this game really turned when Lenora Sellers was sacked and was really unable to go because despite what Shane Beamer says, Dow Loggins really does not have much faith in Robbie Ashford to throw the football unless it's absolutely necessary. I thought that was evidenced by after Dylan Stewart recovers a fumble in the 3rd quarter, South Carolina takes over at the LSU 24 or 25-yard line. It was 3rd and 9, and they just ran a little quarterback sneak. They just conceded to kick a field goal. Maybe if you're going to throw it, run play action on 1st down and try to catch him off guard with a shot to the end zone. But clearly, South Carolina did not have the confidence in him to do it. And so that brings me to my next question. What is your understanding for the status on Lenora Sellers? Our good friend Jordan Kay from Go Gamecocks reported that Sellers has done very little in practice, and at least Tuesday and Wednesday, Ashford was taking all the first team reps. I don't know that I really expect him to play, and quite frankly, I hope he doesn't play because you go into open date, that gives him another week to get healthy, and then you have 2 weeks, hopefully, to get ready for Ole Miss, which if South Carolina could have won this game and beat Akron would probably have been another game day game.
Yeah, we'll see with Sellers. I'm not sure, how much he's done in practice today. Shane Beamer will speak again tonight on the Carolina call, so maybe he'll say a little bit more on Sellers' status. But we'll see. And I think if it is indeed Robbie Ashford does get the start, I think they need to let him, especially early on, get some throws in. Maybe if it's a short route, it's just quick, comfortable routes for him to get some confidence throwing the ball. And Akron's probably, I'd imagine, going to load the box, and we'll see how much that ends up mattering if South Carolina can still get away with the run, just going against Akron. But I think just for down the road, it'd be good to have Robbie get some throws, and just in case they need him again down the road, that they can feel a little more confident in him in the pass game.
All right, so let's go into the Nana's Porch chat box, and WJM41 says, I still can't get over the lack of production from Nicholas Harbor. I mean, I would agree. I do think Alex, obviously, Jared Brown and Mazeo Bennett have really stepped up. So has Michael Smith and Joshua Simon. I think those are, Van Drevis Jacobs, I don't understand him only having one catch against LSU, and that was not until late in the fourth quarter. Your thoughts on Harbor, and then Craig asked, when did Sellers initially hurt his ankle? Well, Craig, it was not in the Kentucky game. I think he had kind of tweaked his hip in that game. He was brought down and sacked late in the second quarter and sprained his ankle. He tried to go the first series in the third quarter, and they didn't think he could run it. We'll get more into that in a little bit. So your thoughts on the lack of production from Harbor, and what are the options at quarterback? Because I still think they're completely wasting Luke Doty. To me, he ought to clearly be the best option at quarterback because he can throw it. And as we all know, when Shane Beamer came in, all they could talk about was Luke Doty's big brain and how smart he was.
Yeah. As far as Harbor, we've seen some flashes of what he can do. I think there's just still some development he's got to do. Obviously not being with the team until the summer because of track. I just think, there's still some things he's got to work on and continue to improve on. And, we'll see just how he continues to, what stats look like as the game goes forward. And, I think we saw him make maybe the second quarter. He had a nice throw and catch with Norris. And, I think that maybe will give him some confidence too, to kind of continue to improve.
All right. So let me tell you about Prize Picks. Today's show is powered by Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less. You can pick your sport, NFL. Okay, this month, Caleb Williams, 1 passing yard. All you have to do is pick the over, and you're halfway to a win. Every Sunday in September, Caleb Williams, 1 passing yard. Okay, they'll set the over or the under at a certain yardage. You pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks puts their members first. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my plays hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Prize Picks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. That helped me in week 1. I picked Rocket Sanders to go over 69.5 yards. I picked another over, and then I had the Texas A&M quarterback Connor Wigman to go over 225 yards, and he didn't. And so I saw he wasn't going to, and so I went ahead and cashed out and won. So Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's easy. It's just you against the numbers. You can pick college, NFL, baseball. When basketball season starts, they'll have that. You pick the sport, the players pop up, you just hit over or under and watch the winnings roll in Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code Gamecocks and get $50 instantly when you make as little as a $5 play. That's code Gamecocks on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play as little as a $5 play. And you don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right. So speaking of over-under, I think I'd probably pick the under on South Carolina's backup quarterback on passing. I mean, what do you think is the plan? Shane Beamer talked about Davis Bevel, but clearly they don't have confidence in Davis Bevel. I know Shane Beamer's got to say the right things. Otherwise, when you're down on the 24-yard line, why not put him in if he can throw it? So what if they know it? He can still hand it off to Rocket Sanders. Luke Doty's not playing at wide receiver. I mean, I'm kind of getting the Kerryon Joyner deja vu here on Luke Doty. What are your thoughts, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, we'll kind of see. I think Shane Beamer mentioned with Luke Doty this week that he's still kind of some quarterback things, just kind of is classified as a wide receiver, but still does a little bit of quarterback things. I think if Sellers can't end up going in this game, you're going to see Robbie Ashford. And I would think they just got to find a ways. We talked about with Norris Sellers, first couple of games to find ways to get him comfortable throws, and that's what they're going to have to do is find ways to get him some easy throws early, and maybe I think you're going to see a lot of run game this week, and that probably goes without saying. You're going to see a lot of run game. They've talked about wanting to get more guys than Rocket Sanders. Keep building depth in that running back room. And I think you're going to see that. You're going to see a lot of Robbie Ashford in the run game. So I expect to see a lot of runs, maybe some design quarterback runs for Robbie Ashford. But, I think a lot of, fans and everybody just kind of wants to see, what he can do in the passing game in that intermediate, the deep level to see if they can get some throws off there.
I would agree. I'd kind of like to see the Boston College plan like they did with Castellanos against Florida State. Some design rollouts with a high-low on one side of the field, the old Steve Spurrier play where you got the high-low, you read the safety, and you have the option to take off. Quite frankly, I would like to see that on the last play before they basically just conceded and handed the ball off to Rocket Sanders up the middle for a 1-yard gain to set up Alex Herrera with less than a 49-yard field goal or 48-yard field goal. They did mention Luke Doty. I do think, Robbie Ashford, I'm going to give him credit. He is an excellent runner, especially inside. I mean, he just has a knack for making people miss, and he's kind of slithery in there. But they got to do something to get him going because he was exactly what he has been, 2 for 4, which is 50%, which is what he has been for his career. So, but let's look at the run game. South Carolina, if you don't include the sacks, Rocket Sanders lost 5 yards rushing. Those were really the only lost rushing yards. South Carolina would have rushed for 286 yards if they didn't count the sacks. It was still 243 yards. 155 yards through the air. But Alex, to me, the most concerning stat is 5 more sacks given up by this offensive line and others. Some of it's on the quarterback, I know. Some of it's on the tight end or a back. But through 3 games, South Carolina has surrendered. South Carolina is one of the leaders in sacks with 12. But they've given up 13 sacks, and Shane Beamer needs to work on his basic math. He said that's 3 a game. Well, it's actually 4 1/3 per game, which is too many.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got to find ways to continue getting that cleaned up, and it's not just the offensive line in that aspect with the sacks. Like, there's been a couple of times you think to that LSU game where the quarterbacks are just holding the ball for too long, and a lot of times, for one thing with the offensive line, I thought in the run game they played really well on Saturday. They opened some holes. I think there's still some things just overall pass protection wise that have to get cleaned up. Not only from an offensive line standpoint, but from the tight ends and running backs and blitz pickup. So that's something that I think is a key from, and maybe to show improvement in this Akron game. And then the bye week, that's where you want to see South Carolina continue to take the next step offensively, is limiting those negative plays, because it feels like through 3 games they've had a lot of tackles for loss and sacks that, moving forward with the schedule that you have ramping up, that's got to be cleaned up.
All right, so I'm going to say again, Shane, if you see this video, if somebody sends it to you, why isn't Sean Elliott the offensive line coach? Because it's still not good enough. And Sean Elliott, who you'd have to think would be able to do it. Probably, I think he's the best offensive line coach in the 21st century of South Carolina football. He's coaching the tight ends, and it's just been more the same. I mean, I will say they are running the ball more effectively. I think the explosives, having a guy like Rocket Sanders and Lenora Sellers, who had the longest quarterback run and for a touchdown in school history, 75 yards on Saturday. I mean, it just adds a different dimension, but they've got a lot to clean up, Alex, over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think with the offensive line, they've shown improvements from where they were in game 1. Like they had a lot to clean up in game 1, and it seems like every game they've continued to take a step forward. We've met, especially in the run game wise. And, I think as we've talked about here a few times, like there's still some things pass protection wise that've got to get cleaned up, because you'll be facing a really, really tough schedule here. With starting with that Ole Miss game and then Alabama and Oklahoma. Like, you gotta be able to protect the quarterback here moving forward, and that's something that I think everybody, South Carolina fans want to see that offensive line continue to take that next step, especially in pass protection.
No doubt, Gamecocks averaging 165.3 yards per game on the ground. However, just 147.3 passing the ball, which is 15th in the SEC, primarily because Kentucky only played 3 quarters in their first game and then couldn't throw it at all against South Carolina. So at least you're ahead of them. But that is 122nd in the FBS. The sacks is dead last in the SEC and 131st in FBS, and only UMass and Old Dominion have allowed more sacks than South Carolina. South Carolina's also fumbled 9 times. Fortunately, they've only lost 3. But then another troubling statistic, South Carolina just 28% on third down. They were just 3 for 12 on Saturday. They're only converting 11 for 40 on the season. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think third downs is one of the more interesting, intriguing stats that they've got to find a way to be better at. And I think a lot of that goes into just being in a better spot in third down, not behind the chains, being in a 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4 type of situation where you're not having to just straight up drop back and having to, pick up a blitz, just because we've seen hasn't been a strong suit so far. So I think third downs is, we've talked about the offensive line, but I think third downs is that next step for this offense to be able to get into a more manageable third down and not being a long third down spot where you're having to rely on your, a young quarterback to have to go make a play, which he absolutely can do, but it's just something that would help your young quarterback out if you're in more manageable third down. And I think if we see them do that, we'll see that percentage on third down continue to improve.
No doubt. So defensively, Kyle Kennard tied for the national lead in sacks with 5 through 3 games. South Carolina has 12 sacks through 3 games. That's 4 per game, not 3, 4. 4 times 3 is 12. Okay, let's all make sure we know our basic math. That has changed this defense. The defensive front, South Carolina is only allowing 126 yards per game on the ground, which is an improvement. But I got to go back to LSU here for the last time. They have been horrendous running the football this year. And South Carolina is dominating them on defense with the 4-2-5. They're up 17-0, and Clayton White comes out in the 3-3-5 look, and LSU just annihilated it. It was like they were waiting on it, and I thought after that, South Carolina's linebackers were just horrendous the rest of the day against the run. You even had for the second time in 3 games, Old Dominion had 4th and 7. Their quarterback runs right up the middle on a blitz for 36 yards and a touchdown. LSU has 3rd and 9, and they run a draw play right up the middle, untouched, 29 yards for a touchdown. That has got to stop. Opponents are converting 39% on 3rd down, which for this defense, that's way too high, in my opinion.
Yeah, and going back to that move to the 3-3 or the 3 down front after starting that 4 down front, I think that's where you saw LSU start to get some momentum back in that game. It was 17-0, and I think the thought process was to drop more in coverage because it was going to be obvious that LSU was going to have to pass to get back into the game. But on that drive, LSU ran all the way down the field, it seemed like, and it gave Nussmeier more time in the pocket, which he didn't have really, to be honest, early on in the game. So, and then they quickly, after that drive, moved back into the 4-4 or the 4-man front. And I think, LSU at that point just had the momentum. And, you mentioned the run defense. I think, with the defense, that's the next step is to continue improving the run defense. That's something that has been okay for the most part through the first 3 games, but that's something that they got to continue to improve on. They've got the pass rushing down. Like, they're some of the best passers in the country. But, I think it's run defense-wise is where that defense needs to take that next step.
So I'm probably going to do something that's unpopular right now. One, Clayton White was asked about going to 3-3-5 by Dave Kleininger, and I thought he was completely tone deaf. I don't regret it. Well, you should have regretted it because it changed the momentum in the game. You can talk about a blown coverage. You can talk about a lot of different things, but the fact is you were dominating them. You had your foot on their throat, and you let them off the ground by going to that. And to say, if you could have it back, maybe you wouldn't do it. I thought fans would have liked that a little bit more than the answer they got. But Debo Williams plays too many plays. He gets tired. The guy plays hard, but he goes for the kill shot on every play, and he misses as many tackles as he made on Saturday. He's diving in there with his head down. They're trying to butt guys to the ground. And you go to the participation in the snap chart, Debo Williams and Bam Martin Scott are playing too much. Demetrius Knight and Bangari Kamara are excellent linebackers, and they're playing too many snaps. O'Donnell Fortune played 78 plays. That's too many. He's not a good tackler to begin with. Is he good in coverage? Yes, but he's almost the Deion Sanders of tackling. It's optional for him. They've got to do something to reduce reps for some of these guys on defense. They have the depth to do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned the open field. I thought tackling, they had too many missed tackles in that game, and that, at times gave LSU even more momentum when they were driving because they'd be, would have a chance to have a negative play, but LSU's running backs or wide receivers to get out of it and turn nothing into something and just kept LSU's offense going. So missed tackles was something that's definitely concerning with the defense. It wasn't too much of an issue in those first 2 games, but especially in that third quarter on, you saw it kind of come back around. And I don't know if that was just in that third quarter, if that was just fatigue, being that they were on the field a lot in that third quarter, but it's something that's got to continue to improve.
Well, here's how you offset fatigue. You play your other guys because you have the depth, you have the veteran talent to do it. But I agree, it's too many tackles. And I look at over 30 missed tackles, Craig points out, and I look at the number of penalties all year, the number of missed tackles, and I think both of those are the result of a lack of discipline. Is you cannot allow guys to get sacks. You cannot continue to commit false starts and be downfield. You can't jump off sides on 4th and 3. That shows a lack of discipline on this football team. And that's something that they have got to figure out. The penalties, the missed tackles, it's just careless. One time, O'Donnell Fortune just tried to tackle the ball. Guy had the ball. He just tried to rip the ball out. The guy just spun away from him and took off. He didn't even try to tackle the guy. And over 30 missed tackles. South Carolina was playing against better athletes, okay? But there's no excuse with the talent on defense to have that many tackles. And to me, when you commit that many penalties, you give up that many sacks, you put the ball on the ground that many times, and you miss that many tackles, you combine all of that, and there is a lack of discipline that is a root cause in the program. That's my take.
Yeah, and you mentioned the penalties. What was it? I think 13 penalties in that game. Like, it's just going really hard to win SEC games, really any game, if you commit 13 penalties. And you can talk about, some of the controversial penalties, but there are some, like just some undisciplined penalties. You think about the offsides. You think about, it seems like there's been a whole bunch of illegal man downfield penalties, and I don't know if that's, referees are paying more attention to that, but there's been some plays where South Carolina's had some linemen downfield or, just illegal formation stuff. Or you think about on that last drive, or South Carolina's last drive, they had the, where I think it was Drevius Jacobs wasn't set going out there. I think it was maybe right around the 50-yard line, and Drevius Jacobs wasn't set, and they always say to make sure to check wide. That's got to continue to get cleaned up here moving forward.
All right, no doubt about it. Alex's internet's driving him nuts. He may end up by the end of the show with his hair looking like mine. So when Alex unfreezes, I did want to ask him about recruiting. So he's popped off. Hopefully he will pop back on. I was hoping we'd have Peyton Titus. She's been sick. She was going to talk to us about South Carolina's women's basketball trip to the White House and their complete schedule, which has been released. And so while we're trying to get Alex back, we will switch gears for just a second, and we'll go to their schedule. All the dates have been released. We don't have the times on the games. We know they're going to open in Memphis at FedEx Arena in an exhibition game for St. Jude's Cancer on October the 15th. They'll face Clayton State in a home exhibition on October the 22nd. That will probably be when they raise the national championship banner. We knew they were going to play Michigan on November the 4th in Las Vegas. I'm hoping to be at that game. They're going to get NC State. Coppin State is really the big game, November 14th, and Clemson, November the 20th at Clemson. UCLA will be on Sunday, November 24th. We got Alex back. And so, Alex, let's talk about recruiting, because that was certainly a great atmosphere, and that's one of the things I didn't really ask you about. I know you were probably in the press box, which kind of kills it a little bit, but talk about the environment, college game day, the spectacle, the crowd, how loud the stadium was. Obviously, the play went down to the final play of the game and could have gone to overtime. How big of a win is that for South Carolina in recruiting, with all the, some flip candidates showed up, and there were a ton of underclassmen there as well?
Yeah, the environment seemed like it was awesome. You could even see or feel it from the press box. It was a raucous atmosphere, and just it was an awesome, I think, for recruiting wise, you mentioned, I know Hale has mentioned some of the recruits, and it seems like the environment was something that really caught their eye, and Shane Beamer mentioned that in his press conference. So, it was a ton of recruits that were in town for that game, and some guys that, we weren't really didn't know about that were coming. Some of those flip candidates, I'm sure we'll get to hear in just a minute, but, that environment, college game day, just how loud the stadium was, I think it is going to pay off some of these, or you're going to hope for the payoff for some of these recruits for South Carolina.
All right, so in a vacuum, I agree. I do want to talk about the recruits after we'll move on. So Mikael Skinner, 4-star. He decommitted from Cincinnati the day before he visited South Carolina. He's seen South Carolina play all 3 times. Is Kentucky the favorite for him? I don't really see it like the Oracle, who I have the utmost respect for. If I had a crystal ball, I think the signs are pointing to South Carolina on Mikael Skinner. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's where signs are pointing right now. I think Kentucky probably is the top competitor for South Carolina. Probably is Kentucky-South Carolina battle, but it seems like South Carolina's been in this one just for a little while now since they offered, and I think I think South Carolina's in a really good spot here for that one.
All right, so obviously there were 3 surprise visitors, at least publicly. 2 from the class of 25, 1 from the class of 26, 5-star defensive end Jared Smith, who committed to Auburn over South Carolina. He was there, even though Auburn had a home game. And one of the top defensive tackles in the country from South Georgia, Greensboro, Georgia, Greene County, Kevin Wynn, who's committed to Florida State, 6'2", 320. Travian Robertson has built an excellent relationship with him. Georgia and Texas, everybody's coming in on Florida State commits because they're 0-3, and their season looks like it's headed for the tank. And then a 2026 big-time quarterback from Nashville, Jared Curtis, was in. He's committed to Georgia. He's built a great relationship with Dow Loggins. That was one of his first 26 offers. Georgia Tech offensive tackle commitment, a 4-star guy. Danola Ajdahan, 6'6", 285 from Duluth, Georgia, was in. Interior offensive lineman Xavier Spikes, who's currently committed to Georgia State, but's been offered by some big schools, was in. And linebacker Josh Smith from Dutch Fork, 6'3", 220, who South Carolina's watching. He is a Coastal Carolina commit. And I think there was a DB commit as well that's committed to West Virginia from Dutch Fork or somewhere that was in. Talk to us about these 20 and 25 guys.
Yeah, it was quite a surprise when we saw Jared Smith at that game. South Carolina had been on him for a while, and just for him to come from making a way all the way to Columbia from Alabaster, Alabama for that game, I think it says something, and we'll see where that one kind of goes with him. Kevin Wynn is somebody. We think about interior, that defensive tackle recruiting. That's something that I think they're going to continue to target in this class because they need some depth there, and I think he's still going to be one of their top guys. He took an official visit in the summer, and I think they were right in it until the end when Florida State ended up getting his commitment. So we'll see kind of with him too what happens. And then Jared Curtis was a guy who was a big surprise. One of the top quarterbacks in that 2026 class. And I think when you remember when Jared Curtis was kind of early on in his recruitment, South Carolina was kind of right there in it with him, and they just ended up committing to Georgia. So I think it was pretty interesting to see those guys, and as well as other guys that committed to other schools that made their way. But I think they're hoping that environment that they saw paid off for them in the long run.
I mean, no doubt about it. So, Alex, let me ask you about Malik Clark, because he's kind of tight with some of South Carolina's commitments, especially Cutter Woods, the quarterback commit from Westside High School. Florida State's 0-3. What are the chances South Carolina gets him back on campus? Because to me, that's probably the biggest loss of the summer, because he was an in-state kid out of a traditionally Gamecock area, and you lost him to an out-of-state school who's now 0-3.
Yeah, he's a guy. When he committed to Florida State in the summer, they haven't stopped recruiting him, and they've been on him still and staying on him. So, I think that with the way Florida State season's going, they've stayed right on him, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him at a game. I know there's not one scheduled for him, officially to be in, but I don't think it'd be too much of a surprise if he showed up to a game here in the near future. And it's going to be interesting to keep up with that recruitment to see just with Florida State season and what Malik Clark ends up doing.
All right, so lastly, and if you need to go, let me know and I'll let you go, because I've kept you too long already. Have you got like 5 more minutes?
Yeah, that's fine. 5 minutes, good.
All right, so let's look to Akron now. What are really the keys for South Carolina? Because to me, this game is about South Carolina and then moving into the open day.
Yeah, I think just come out strong in this one. I think that's that's a key for every game, but don't let that LSU loss linger. And I think being a veteran team and having a lot of older players, I don't think that's going to happen. You could listen to Nick Emmanwori and Debo Williams talk in the post-game press conference at the LSU, and it sounds like they were ready to go back on the field right then just to get that loss out of their system. So I think just come out strong. Don't play with the same aggression and attitude that you did against LSU. And when you think about Akron's offense, Joe Moorhead's a really good coach and a really good offensive coach, and kind of run that interesting 2-quarterback system. So they've got a lot to prepare for this week with Akron. But I think just we'll talk about offensively. If Robbie Ashford does end up going, just find ways to get him comfortable, get that run game going, and keep that run game momentum. So I think just come out strong, and don't let that LSU loss linger, which I don't think I expect that to happen.
I mean, I would completely agree. If you had to guess, just based off today, what do you think the odds that Lenore Sellers plays? Because quite frankly, if it was me, I wouldn't play it. I mean, you ought to be able to beat Akron. Obviously, Shane Beamer said you want to get a win, and if he's 100%, he's going to play. I mean, I just wouldn't risk it because – but I do agree if he's 100%, you want to get him out there. But if he's not, you don't want to risk him re-injuring it and then not being 100% for Ole Miss in 2 weeks, which really will be another big-time game, and hopefully it'll be a night game, which, you should be able to at least replicate the LSU atmosphere, if not even better than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, with the quarterback situation, I think if Lenora Sellers was a senior or like a redshirt junior or senior and had experience, we're probably not talking too much about what his stats would be for the game, just because they think go ahead and rest him and get him ready for give him an extra week with that bye week and then going into Ole Miss. But I think if he's good to go, I think you play him a little bit just because we've seen him get better and better with each game and each rep. So we'll see there. They still got a few days of practice, or I guess maybe 2 days of practice to see if he's ready to go. But I think without a doubt we'll see Robbie Sum at least a little, even if Lenore Sellers is ready to go. I think you'll see both guys play.
What are the odds Luke Doty plays in this game at quarterback?
I guess it maybe depends on the score. If things are getting out of hand, like you're going to see a lot of Robbie's going to get that. If Lenore doesn't go, you're going to see Robbie Ashford get the start. And so I think maybe if things are down the line, or South Carolina's got a comfortable lead, you see Luke Doty just as kind of that emergency situation. If a situation like this comes up again, where maybe Robbie has to come out for a play, who goes in. So now I wouldn't be surprised if maybe late third, fourth quarter, and South Carolina has this game where they think they can have it. You may see Luke Doty in there just to get him some reps.
I agree. Well, Alex, I can't thank you enough. Thanks for going overtime with us today as well. And get some rest. I know it's a busy time of year. I know there are more recruits that are going to be there. I know you and Hale have it all covered. For everybody listening, if you're not a member of thebigspur.com, why aren't you a member of thebigspur.com? To me, it's as much of a no-brainer as Sean Elliott not being the offensive line coach, maybe even more. Alex, thanks again. Be well, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Awesome. I always enjoy being on. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, so that is thebigspur.com's Alex Jones. So let's go back into the Nana's Porch chat box. I think Craig did give us the stat of over 30 missed tackles. WJM41 said Clayton White outsmarted himself. I didn't really like it. To me, I'm old school. I'm a Joe Morrison guy. That's when I was at Carolina. If it ain't broke, you don't need to fix it. Okay, if your car is working perfectly and it's purring like a kitten, are you taking it into the shop and tell them to overhaul the engine? I don't think so. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's my motto. The discipline is older and they should be more disciplined. I completely agree. I do agree they could have called another delay of game on LSU for that defensive line shift. I also thought they called a phantom penalty on our center, Vershawn Lee, and he got his helmet ripped off, and they made him come off for a play. That should have been a penalty on LSU. They ripped his helmet off. I don't mind Staley with the HBCU game. I know it's Coppin State, so we still remember Fang Mitchell and the Eddie Fogler team choking that off as a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. FSU is a mess. Auburn, they can't beat Cal. Craig wants Donovan Murph. I think that atmosphere in that game kind of goes a long way. Akron hadn't won 3 games since 2018. I agree. That's why this game's about Carolina. You don't want to let LSU beat you twice. You want to be sharp. You don't want to get your best players injured. You want to get – and I want to see Juwan Howell run the ball. I want to see Matthew Fuller run the ball. I want to see some of these other guys at wide receiver, and I don't want to see Debo Williams playing 60 plays on defense. He gets tired, he goes for the kill shot, and he misses tackles. So hopefully this is not a repeat of Old Dominion, and South Carolina can build a big lead. And so I will say this, okay. It was a huge win for South Carolina in a vacuum. And I'm going to, again, quote Will Muschamp. So what? Now what? So what? You were up 17-0. You were up 24-10. Yeah, your quarterback got hurt. Yeah, you had some bad calls go against you. So what? Now what? What happens now? To quote Sean Connery in The Untouchables, what are you prepared to do? What are you prepared to do? What do you do now? So what? It's like life is 10% about what happens to you and 90% about how you respond. And South Carolina needs to respond. South Carolina proved they can play with basically anybody on their schedule. Okay, there are winnable games at home, but you can't lose 2 or 3 more games like this where you really have a chance. You're going to need to get better at the passer. You're going to need to get better at throwing the football. You're going to need to get better in not putting the ball on the ground, and your third down defense is going to need to get better. And you're going to have to get better as a team tackling, and you're going to have to be more disciplined to win these types of games against a Missouri, against an Ole Miss at home, against a Texas A&M at home, on the road at Oklahoma, on the road at Clemson. These games are winnable. Okay, even at Alabama, if you play lights out and get that game to the fourth quarter, you'll have a shot. I'm not saying you're going to win it. My good friend Chris Payne, who is the owner and operator of Nana's Porch, has chimed in. Says, I'm an hour and a half behind, but LSU had 7 yards and the defensive coordinator switches schemes. Tell me how that makes sense. Chris, it doesn't make a lick of sense. Okay? It's like Joe Morrison said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. South Carolina had their boot on LSU's throat, and when Clayton White went from the 4-2-5 to the 3-man front, South Carolina let their foot off of their throat. Okay? I didn't like it either, as Chris said. Some folks are planning on going to Bama. You should. I think this will be South Carolina's first trip to Alabama since 2009, when Mark Ingram won the Heisman Trophy, and they had to go to the Wildcat and just run him. That's the only chance they had against Ellis Johnson's defense. I think they went on to win the national championship that year. It was a close game, and then the next year, we all know what happened when they came into Williams-Brice Stadium. They got that ass spanked by 2 touchdowns. Alshon Jeffrey basically mossed their entire defense the whole game. Lattimore was great, and so was really Melvin Ingram's coming out party nationally in that game. There's a lot of stuff out there. I agree, Craig. Look how many runs they broke outside the left side, and we never set the edge. That's right. And my guy, Jordan Kay from Go Gamecocks, he asked Clayton White about it before the LSU game. Do you really struggle to go the 3-man front? Because in the 4-2-5, you don't need to change. You had your foot on their throat. They had 7 yards of offense, and Garrett Nussmeier didn't have all day to throw. And the edges were set, and there were not the gaping holes for the running backs to run through. And I thought after that, the defense was never the same. I think LSU had like 60-something yards running the ball against Nichols, and they rushed the ball against Carolina for 132 yards and is really about 160 yards because Nussmeier lost 24 yards on the sacks, which he had not been sacked. He got sacked twice. He should have been sacked more than that, quite frankly. So, to me, this game this weekend is about getting better. Not necessarily Norris Sellers getting better, but South Carolina getting better. Not having the penalties, not having the missed tackles, finishing the deal in the red zone, not surrendering and waving the white flag and just on third down or second down, running it up the middle and settling for field goals. This is a bounce back game. Give yourself some momentum going into the open date. You got 2 weeks to get ready for Ole Miss, and they are really good. And they, probably maybe the only team in the country that's been more productive with their transfer portal pickups than South Carolina. But I'll say this. The next time Lane Kiffin wins a big SEC road game, it'll be the first time. And I know they're really good. South Carolina will not be favored. But if that game, it's flexed, it could be a night game. It's going to be at least 3:30 or later. That should be an unbelievable environment. South Carolina should be 3-1. Hopefully Sellers is 100%. He should be if he doesn't get re-injured. And you have a chance to sharpen the saw, go back to fundamentals on blocking, tackling, ball security, and being more disciplined and not committing as many penalties. So appreciate everybody for jumping in the chat box, especially my good friend Chris Payne. Again, you can get it's as easy as a couple of clicks. Go to bananasporch.com, look up at the top on the right, click on pimento cheese, and you can order it right to your front door. So until next week, when we'll go back to Wednesday on the open date, this has been episode number 1577, Gamecock Pod live for September the 19th. God bless everybody. Go Gamecocks, and God bless America. I'm out of here.